Okay, we are live on Two Feathers Virtual Indigenous Speaker Series. Hello, my name is Dr. Virgil Moorhead Jr. I'm part of the Big Lagoon Rancheria, which is Yurok and Talawa, and I'm also the Behavioral Health Director here at Two Feathers Native American Family Services. Before I introduce my guests and get into questions, I just want to pay honor and respect to the people and the land that I'm currently on and Two Feathers is on, which is the Wiyot people in Humboldt County. I also want to let those that are tuning in know that Two Feathers, we stand in solidarity with the people that are on the ground, that are fighting the good fight and the struggle for justice. And so with that, we have my colleague Shoshone Hostler here, and we also have the great Jerry Tello. And Jerry is the co-founder of the National Compadres Network. He's also worked, his work has been seen in Time, Newsweek, Latina, Lowrider Magazine. He's the recipient of the 2015 White House Champion of Change Award, to name numerous things that he's really been honored for his work over 40, 50 plus years. Some of his work focuses on transformational healing, men and boys of color, racial justice, and violence prevention. And so, welcome, Jerry.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Virgil, and really appreciate the time to be here and for us to just talk about how we can bring healing to our people and how we can bring regrounding that way.
Thank you. And so we're going to get right into our conversation today. Shoshone is on the set with us. Shoshone Hostler, maybe you could say a few words.
Yeah, hi, Ayakwi, Naknao Shoshone. I'm a mental health therapist here at Two Feathers, and I'm just really excited to be part of this conversation today. We have a really great guest who's done some exceptional work in this field, and so I'm just excited to get right into the conversation.
Thank you, Shoshone. And so, Jerry, I think you're a wonderful storyteller, and I've been researching you and really following your work. And one of the stories that really sticks with me is when you talk about your story of with your mother and the bowl of beans and the significance of that bowl of beans. And so maybe could you share with us that the story of the bowl of beans and how, being served every day, that same bowl of beans, and just take us there, as maybe a child and some of the principles that you've taken from that bowl of beans.
Thank you. Let me just first of all just begin by saying Noxtin Nomekayetsin and thanking Creator for another day of life. And I want to acknowledge my ancestors. My dad, Jorge Perez Tello, that was Tapilan, Coavitecan, grew up and raised in Yanaguana, which is now called San Antonio, Texas. My mom, Maria Susolage Ramos, that is Mexica Tarahumara, was born in Chihuahua. And, raised a bunch of us kids. We ended up in Compton. And, after being in different places, I'm straight out of Compton, so I grew up in that black-brown neighborhood, with a lot of things going on in my life, but you mentioned that bowl of beans. One of the things we don't recognize before those beans are cooked, there's been many prayers that have gone on before she even put on those beans. My mama got up really early in the morning before doing anything, and knelt down and connected with Creator in her sacred ways, and just brought that, if you will, that medicine, brought that spirit, because, thinking about being a dad, and myself, as much as we want to do good with our kids and help them and teach them in a good way, we live in a society that sometimes doesn't give us that same respect. So I know my mom struggled, and I just, as a psychologist myself, I know one of the things that I'm charged to do is to look at families and parenting styles and how you're raised and all of that. And in this Western way, it's kind of very critical. We analyze it without even knowing what someone has gone through, without even knowing who people are, without even knowing the journey that they've traveled. So, just to make those beans, there was a long journey before, she even thought about making that pot of beans. Half of her day was already done, and I laughed because I said, my mom never slept. Because when I woke up, when she was awake, and when I went to sleep, she was still awake doing something. And I think, if you raise kids, and my mom would tell us, come home at a certain time because I can't rest unless you're home. So I know even though my mom laid her head down, sometimes she wasn't resting because she was worried about us, what was going to happen to us. And she saw the way the world treated us too. So, and again, growing up in this Western society, and it already as a young kid indoctrinating me on what was valuable, what do you appreciate, and I didn't see a bowl of beans on any commercial that this is what you should have. I didn't see that in lunch program. I didn't see any of that, but that's what we had. My mom would make those beans, but she didn't just make those beans. She would put us there at that time, you would get the raw beans and we'd have to take little rocks out of those beans. And my mom would sit us down to take the rocks out, right? And we wanted to go play, but she said, no, you help me take these rocks out. What? And I didn't understand that what my mom was doing and she told us, you got to take those things out of your life, so whatever you're going to put in you is good for you. You got to weed those things, take those things out. So my mom was teaching us just in preparing those beans, right? And then after that, she would get those beans and put them in that pot and put the onion and the cilantro and the garlic and all of that. And then she would bless those beans, give thanks that way, and I didn't understand any of that, I just wanted to eat, man, give me some beans, but I would complain about eating those beans every day. Why do we got it? Can't you change it up? Can't you make something else? And my mom would get mad. You ought to be glad you have something. The kids don't have nothing, And I didn't realize till much later, really, really much later, that in that recipe, in that tradition, in that ceremony, if you will, of just making that pot of beans, was a lot of medicine. Because that was the same way her mama did it. And her mama did it, and her mama did it. So when she blessed that pot of beans up, she called to all those generations and saying, feed my kids, not just this material food, but feed them. Put in their genetic memory the sacredness that comes from the earth, that comes from cultivating like that. We are people of the land of the earth. So when she fed us those beans, it was a sacred medicine for us. And me being a kid, I didn't understand. I really didn't understand until my mama crossed over. And I couldn't taste those beans no more. And man, I've tried all kinds of the recipe, thinking that my sisters tried, we all tried, man, we can't get it. We can't get those beans like that, We just can't get them. We try, but I still have that memory. And whenever I make those beans, I call my mom, help me, mama. Help me make those beans, So what we know in that teaching is that even though you may not have had a mama that made you beans, you may not have had a grandma, just calling to those ancestors' medicine can reignite the medicine in you, the memory in you. That's why we have kinship. That's why we have aunties and grandmas and people that we call uncle. In my language, we call tata, grandfathers, right? Because we knew that we needed that extended kinship. And now Shoshone, she's gone to school and she's going to go back and help these young people, right? She's going to be their auntie. She's going to be their older sister, Some of them didn't have that, And I realized that in my walk, okay, I got my degree, got my license, got all of that, was doing this clinical work, and they'd send these young people to me for different clinical behavioral problems that they had, but didn't realize what they were really looking for as an uncle. Somebody that would look at them and acknowledge them, that would see them beyond their wounds, see into their sacredness, and then bring it out of them because they couldn't see it. So many of these young people we work with have been told so many negative things about who they are, about their behavior, and they begin diagnosis. And once you give somebody a diagnosis, once you begin to label them, it's almost like a false naming ceremony. You rename them in a different way, right? And once they hear that so much, sometimes they then take it on. And when you take on that name and if you will, that caricature, sometimes you believe that's who you are. Part of this medicine and this tradition and this healing is saying, no, let me cleanse you of that. Let me reconnect you with who you really are. So that beans, and all of us have those traditional foods, There's always a duality, the male, female. So with the beans, with the tortillas, we always have to have if you have that soup, you can have some fry bread there, whatever that duality is. You got to have them both, to really make them taste good, to balance things out. But we don't recognize in these days the ceremony. And now I can buy tortillas and beans in a can. I can buy beans in a can and tortillas and microwave them, but don't do that. You take the medicine out. You got to go through that traditional ritual in order to get them in a good way. So that's a little bit about those beans.
Thank you for that, Jerry. And it reminds me of something else that you talk about, but related to what you just talked about, is the power of the feminine. And also in many of your stories, you talk about the power of your grandma's teachings and how she would bless you every day, at 4:30, and and so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the power of the feminine, and also maybe just that blessing in the sacredness of life, and how that's related to these times and healing and going forward as a community such as the Native American community up here that Two Feathers serves. Like, how do we take some of those teachings that you got from your grandma, the daily blessings and just the sacredness of life?
Yeah, what's important is indigenous people we're matrilineal. We come from that feminine. I mean, it's obvious, and our mamas carry us like that, and they hold us for those 9 months, and then and then they release us like that. And but they, while they're holding us, they give us their drum, they give us that heartbeat, right? They give us that river of the fluids within us, and they give us the breath, that breath that's so sacred. And we wait for that baby to come out, to hear that breath, to hear that song, to hear that whimper, to hear that cry, and we know when that baby's born that a blessing is born. We know it, and you can ask any grandmother, there's no ugly babies, right? They're all beautiful that way, and even the monkeys think their babies are beautiful, So when that baby comes out, but we know, and my grandmother knew, as all grandmas know, and let me just say, the sacred grandfathers know too. It's not just, because even as a male, I have the feminine in me. If I'm willing to go there, if I'm willing to reach for that, if I'm willing to really move that rhythm, it's there. The feminine is in me. So grandfathers can do it too, But my grandma was the one, and she would get up early in the morning, and then after, she'd say her prayers. And sometimes, there'd be, depending on how many problems we had in the family, that's how long the prayers lasted. Sometimes they're quick, half an hour, sometimes they're 2 hours, and especially when she was worried about one of us as a teenager. But when she finished, she would come over to where we all slept, and she would bless us up. And I didn't like it, because sometimes it'd wake me up early in the morning, and I thought it was a bother. I didn't understand, Didn't understand what she was telling me. Didn't understand what she was doing to me. Didn't understand that she was saying, you are a blessing, just the way you are. And she would bless the kids who were good in school, the ones that weren't good in school, the articulate ones, the stinky ones, but she didn't care. She blessed us all up. And that was a real powerful message, that way. But the other thing that our ancestors know, and our grandmas and grandpas know, is you have to inoculate those kids. You have to bless them up. You have to, if you will, put this spirit around them, because my grandma knew that we lived in a world that did not see me as a blessing. In fact, saw me in a way that already categorized me as a delinquent, as a troublemaker, as wanting to, kick me out of school for anything that I did, wanting to deport me, wanting to incarcerate me. And so she knew that. And so she inoculated me that way. with that blessing. And I really believe it's our responsibility as traditional people to bless each other up. That greeting, just greeting one another in a blessing way. And the thing is that my dad, he was a tough guy. He didn't play. My dad, loud talking man, real, kind of rough kind of guy like that. And his discipline was light, and he would scold us before we did something wrong. And I remember going to visit relatives. He would say, "Hey, remember when you go to your auntie's house? Before you run and play, you walk in, you hug and kiss everybody, right?" And it took half an hour to get in the door, man, just to get in, And some of those relatives you didn't even like, and some of the cousins you didn't want to see, Didn't matter. You had to greet them all. You had to greet them all because, from my daddy's point of view, and now I understand it in terms of teachings, is that everyone needs to be acknowledged. Everyone needs to be acknowledged. And so just in that tradition, seems like a simple tradition. Seems like, why do we do that? And, that you're saying, I acknowledge you. I see you. I see you. I see you. The young people that are most vulnerable are the ones that don't get that don't get that acknowledgement, that don't get that blessing. That in fact, because of the wounds, and we recognize the generational wounds that some of our families have, and if a young boy didn't get that, a young girl didn't get that, and then they become parents, and their focus is just to survive, then sometimes they give that woundedness to their kids, and they don't have that feminine, they don't have that loving, that unconditional loving. And so what they do is hey, get up and get to school. What's the matter? And all they get is that other part, And so when those young people get in the street on the way to school, and they're at a school that doesn't love them and accept them and bless them, and they're on the way, and one of their homies says, "What did they come here, fool? I got you." Your spirit needs that acknowledgement. Where are you going to go? You going to go to school or are you going to go hang out? And because of all the stuff going on in your life, you got this anxiety going on in you. You can't sleep. Your leg shakes when you're sitting there. And your homie says, "Here, hit this, dude." You want to go to school, but man, when you're anxious, your body doesn't feel right, so you hit it. Because no one is helping you to know, what do you do with these unsettling feelings? What do you do with this anxiety? What do you do with this sadness? What do you do with this self-hate? And you go to a therapist and they say, "Well, let me give you a diagnosis. You're ADD and you got to take this medication." And then we over-medicate, Native people and indigenous young people of color. And when you put that medicine, if you will, which is really a chemical in their body, without even knowing who they are, you don't know if it's going to be good for them. And I'm not saying that some kids don't need some medicine, but the medicine is not the healing. The medicine is only, that medicine is only to help you regulate so the healing can go on. Unfortunately, in this Western society, the medication becomes the treatment. And if they don't comply with that, then they can get locked up or referred for being defiant or whatever, all these things that don't help our people that way. So, so it is relationships, it is that blessing, it is that extended kinship, it is that embracing, not just the young people, their families too, because parents are hurting, grandmas are hurting, grandpas are hurting. We got wounded elders, that never got healed themselves, and that's one of the issues, that I can talk about a little later, and why we started the National Compadres Network, because we saw a lot of domestic violence in our home. We saw a lot of violence in our communities. And as much as we, were aware of social justice and injustice and racism and all of that, and we spoke up and we marched against that and did that, we went home. And we went home, we saw the wounds in our home. And we knew as men that we were the cause of much of it. So we had to choose how we're going to handle this. And we chose to step up and say, you know what? We can't fix the whole world, but I can fix this one. I can fix how I treat my relations. I can stand up against that violence. I can reclaim the sacredness of who I am and choose. And the first step, we tell young boys in their rites of passage, first step to honorable manhood, sacred manhood, is honoring women, honoring the feminine. If you can't do that, then there's no more lessons. We need to start there. because that's where creation starts. So.
Thank you. Very powerful. I'm going to turn over to Shoshone. I know she has some question for you, Jerry.
Yeah, that was very powerful, and it kind of leads into my question about when we're talking about some of that anxiety and uh, other self-loathing, other feelings of maybe shame or guilt, and where in your experience, are there any special considerations or difficulties in getting some boys or adolescents to recover their sacredness and really embrace that?
Yeah, I mean, shame and blame and anxiety are all manifestations of something deeper, right? And I talk about this circle of healing that is important. When a baby's born to the world, this baby comes with a spirit and comes. The ancestors send them our way, but that baby comes into this world asking two questions: Am I wanted? And who am I connected to? And that's why in many of our traditions, we have so much ceremony around, babies, and they come. And I remember as a kid, a new baby was born, in the family. Oh, we have to go visit the baby. You got to take a plate over there, and, we got to go all this stuff. And, I'm thinking, what do we got to go visit this baby for, man? What there's a hassle, no. You had to go and visit the baby. My grandma said, you got to go up and, touch that baby, say something pretty about the baby. And, I mean, and I didn't understand that significant, the rooted sense, the rooted teaching of that you are wanted. You are wanted. So when young people come to me, before I'm asking questions, before I'm looking at behavioral problems, before I'm addressing, I'm saying, come here, son, come here. Come here, sit with me. Thank you for coming. Thank you for blessing me. And then, well, I don't even want to be here, fool. Shit, my PO sent me. What I got to be here for? You're going to do shit for me. Thank you for coming, I was a little bit lonely today. I got to talk to, and I see you got that fiery spirit. Oh, man. You got that fire. Let me see what kind of, you might be a coyote. You one of them trickster dudes, huh? What are you talking about, trickster? Oh, you like to joke and tease, huh? Well, how do you know? I just see it in your spirit. I see it in your spirit. So tell me, how does that help you? Because tell me about you. I need to know about you. Well, what do you need about? Okay, let me tell you about me. Let me tell you about me, all right? And I began to share with him, and we in our traditional way, we that's that waterway, that mirror. When you look in the water, you see your reflection, right? And so in greeting people, the first thing is to say, I want you to be welcome. And I can't ask you to do anything unless I do it. So let me share about, when I was about your age, I remember when I was about, oh man, somebody would have sent you somebody, I wouldn't have come either, dude. But unless they offer me pizza, then I probably would have come. But, and so that first critical thing in working with somebody to deal with anything, to deal with anxiety, to deal with shame, is that sense of welcoming, is that sense of connection, and then, that's why in our traditions, we call them nephew, nephew, because right away, you're connected to me. And the thing is, when somebody's related, you treat them different. So you can call me uncle. And I remember this little 8-year-old boy that I was dealing with that had lost his dad. His dad had been killed in a gang shooting. And the kid was fighting, just beating up everybody, fighting, and they sent him to me to see him. And I began playing with him mainly initially. And then, began talking with him, draw, his dad and all of that. But he wouldn't cry or nothing, And I said, I'm sorry that your dad, is not here with you anymore. And I said, and I can't replace your daddy, but you can call me uncle. I'll be your uncle. You're not my uncle. Oh, I know, but you can call me uncle if you want. You can call me Tio, But you're not my Tio. And I said, well, I know that, but I can be that. If you call me that, I'll call you nephew. Well, if you're really my uncle, then you want to be my uncle? Okay. Then on Tuesday night, I'm doing a play at school. Come see me in my play. And I'm saying, oh shit, man, I'll go Tuesday night. I wonder what's a Lakers, shoot, you know. But I already said it. I said, okay, I'm your uncle. And he says, okay, you remember, then show up, right? And you got to be careful that way. You know, if we want to be related, then, you know, the young people are going to say, okay. I showed up there on Tuesday night. He was playing this mushroom in this play right there, dancing like a mushroom. And I walk in and he sees me. And as soon as he sees me, he gets bigger in his mushroom, you know, dance. And then after, I go up to him after the play's over. He's with his little friends right there. And I say, hey, man, you did a good job. And it's like, who's that? Who's that? That's my cousin. That's my uncle. And just like that. Just like that. His mama told me the next week that he was sleeping through the night. Because before that, he was kicking and waking up and having nightmares. And so that's the first place. The first place is to make that connection. Before you deal with the behavior, the problems, you know, and that's the question when I work with people. Do you really like these kids you work with? When I'm in schools, I say, do you like these kids? Well, I'm just teaching algebra. No, do you like them? They can tell whether you like them or not. You know, and the ones that know that you like them, they're going to show up even after class is over. They're going to come back to you. And I got people that I've seen 20 years ago that come back. You know, now they're dads and now they're coming back with their own kids, right? Because they trust me, right? So the first step is that connection, is that sense of welcoming, that sense of extended kinship, the sense of recreating. Even for those kids, we have a lot of young people that don't have daddies. Their dads are locked up or their dads are wounded. Both moms and dads are wounded, right? And so we have to be that extended kinship. They see the duality, and in life, again, there's a duality. There's always night and day. You know, you always have that grandfather son that comes up, but you have the grandmother moon too. And some of us are afraid of that dark. And all of us have that night and day in us. Unfortunately, some of these young people only see the darkness. So we have to present the light, not shaming their parents, not shaming but just saying, let me give you another way to look at this. And maybe have you consider that your dad is acting that way, not because he doesn't love you, but because no one has loved him. And he doesn't know how to love. Doesn't justify his behavior. But that's one example of how to be a man. Let me give you another example. Right? And so we began in this exploration of how we can be the sacredness of who we are. And it's not an easy journey, you know. But it's one in which you say, I'll walk with you. Let's go, I'll walk with you. I don't know if that answered your question, but...
Yeah, it did. Thank you. That was amazing. And as a follow-up question, I was curious about for adolescent groups for boys, how do you acknowledge and hold space for survivors of violence, or even on the other hand, like a restorative justice of maybe someone who has perpetuated violence but also has been hurt by violence?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you know, again, I think it's the relationship, you know, that is key. And you know, it's important to have spaces for everyone. But if we're talking about young people right now, you know, young men and young women, and you know, those that are on that gender spectrum too, we need to have spaces where all people feel welcome, right? Where they feel welcome. And the thing is, when we gather people in, you know, those healing or talking circles or prayer circles or whatever, you know, we bring them in we're all the same. We all come in, you know, there's nobody that's ahead of nobody, we all feel we have gifts and baggage. We all have blessings and we all have struggles. And all of us have been violated in one way or the other. You know, I don't care who you are, you've been violated in one way or the other, right? And so we don't put a hierarchy to the violence. We don't put, this is more significant pain than this, you know. And in the circles that we, you know, share with young people, that, you know, part of this journey is, how do you balance that duality? How do you water, you know, those blessings, and how do you heal that woundedness, so that what begins manifesting in you is more of the blessings and less of the woundedness. Now, let's be clear, the woundedness is also a teacher for you, right? It can become your medicine. So if you have been a victim of violence, you then have energetically and spiritually a pathway, a portal to deal with other people that have experienced that. And if you can turn that around and not allow that to hurt you or to inhibit you, but you can then transform it into medicine, it can then be a vehicle for you helping other people. So, anything that's happened to you in life can be your teaching. I think, in Western society, we categorize things, right? And we even calling people victims, right? If they become stuck in the victimhood, and you see this, I see it all day long. I mean, even in programs all across the country, that have formerly incarcerated youth, they introduce him as a formerly incarcerated youth. Wait, he's more than that. He's not just formerly incarcerated. Well, he's a victim of violence. No, he's more than that. And it's like many of us, that have been through some type of addiction. I'm an alcoholic. Well, I realize that's one of your wounds, but that's not all of who you are. In Western society, that's the way they want to categorize you according to your wound, according to your victimhood. And yes, it's important to acknowledge your wounds and acknowledge your addictions, acknowledge those patterns. But we must go beyond that to acknowledge also the blessings and everything so that you can transform that as well. And so when we work with young people, definitely the accountability is important. That if you have an issue with violence, if you have an issue with drugs, you have an issue with alcohol, you have an issue with sexual addiction, it's important to know you're tricksters. It's important to know those elements of you that are companions to you. Because if you ignore it, they're going to trick you and they're going to get you again. So you must actually make relationship with them and say, I see you, and recognize them when they're starting to creep up. Say, I got you, fool. You ain't coming next to me. I'm not doing this. And sometimes we need other people to recognize it too. And the reason for acknowledging it is so that our friends and our families know, don't take him in that bar. Don't give him this. You see him getting red, you better move him out because the fool's getting ready to snap, right? Other people sometimes need to help you with those things as well. And that's why it's not an individual process. It's a collective process. And when we're in circle like that, when we're with that, we do rites of passage with young men, and then we have a program for young women as well. It's really about building that the brotherhood, the sisterhood amongst them so they can help each other. Because young people spend more time amongst each other than we do with them. So we can rebuild the sense of their own support and healing among themselves. Then they can regenerate themselves, and they become an example for that next generation too.
Thank you. I had a follow-up, Jerry. You mentioned earlier with the building of the National Compadres Network and wounded elders. But also, I know one of the things you talk about is, we have a whole group of people, professionals, who think just because they have a degree, they don't have to do the work. Right. And so I'm wondering, what have you found that's helpful to building that group of men in the Compadres Network, or just working with professionals on how to get well, to heal? Because it seems to me that that's really important in the work with youth, that if we have wounded healers, it's going to be really hard to heal the wounded kids.
Yeah. Well, I think it comes back to, there's a term in my traditional language called encloque nawake, which means interconnected sacredness. It really means, what in many of our traditional native tribes, we say all my relations, right? That we're connected to everything. We're connected to the universe. We're connected to, the four-legged, to the winged, but to all our relations. And everything we do affects all our relations that way. And what we need to recognize is all our behaviors reflect that as well. And so, as men, we had to recognize, because over 30 years ago when we came together, because we wanted to deal with the issue of sexual assault and domestic violence and some of the things that were going on perpetrated by men on women, because I was working a lot in the area of domestic violence and sexual abuse and all of that. And when a number of us came together, actually 19 men came together to begin developing programs. Specifically, it was culturally based, all of that, over 30 years ago. But we began by lighting some medicine, calling to the ancestors, asking them to guide us, And then we began, passing that talking stick around and saying, who are you and why are you here? And our second brother who's now one of our elders, began talking about, yes, I want to help my community and I do a lot of work in the community, but I'm still wounded. And he talked about his own childhood abuse. And he talked about how it impacted him. And even today, as a married man with kids, he says, I don't know how to love my children. I don't know how to love my wife because I've never dealt with that wound. And the way that I dealt with it is I overachieved. I went to school, got my degree and everything. He says, and I'm really good with other people, but I'm not good with my wife and I'm not good with my kids. What I really need here is to know how to heal myself. And he began to cry. And that was really strange 30 some years ago to see, this man cry. We were all there like, oh, shoot, what's going on here? Dang, this is weird. We were here to do program development. We're here to do about, crying and men crying but, be careful when you ask the ancestors to come in. Be careful when you light that medicine because they'll bring you exactly what you need. And through their prayer, they opened him up and they opened all of us up. And all of us began crying. And all of us began talking about our own wounds. That even though we may be, a PhD psychologist, social worker, lawyer, whatever, we were all jacked up. And we realized, and after that first circle shit, we're all jacked up. And we realized the most revolutionary thing we could do was to heal ourselves. That the most sacred thing we could do is first heal ourselves. That the most important thing we could do is to take that medicine home and treat the women, the children, the elders, and make other men accountable. Not in a conflictual way, not a confrontational way, but make sure that we built a way of making people accountable. And I'm going to tell you, I've been on this road a long time. I still am dealing with my wounds. I still got my times. And I'm still doing my healing. And I'm still in circle and I'm still gathering, and so I need to have places, and people look to me that way to guide things, but I need to have places where I'm not guiding anything, where I'm just there. I'm just doing my own healing, and you asked about elders, I make a distinction between elders and olders. Some people just old, and it's not that we know to respect people for their long journey, but it's not just about your long journey. It's about, have you done your work? And if it's about, if it's about just you and your ego and what you've accomplished in your position, because, there's people even in, tribal circles that are positions of power that are hurting other people. And as us as men, we have to deal with the false teachings and the false colonization of that false masculinity and the misogyny and all of those things that were indoctrinated in us, and we use them to survive and all of that, but the ramifications of that have really hurt our families. And the really sad thing is many men and many boys feel that misogyny and that toxicity and that patriarchy is who we really are. That's not who we really are. That's who we've become because of the woundedness. So we need to call back our spirits. We need to relearn the sacredness of who we are. We need to bring accountability, and not in a hostile way, not in a shameful way, but in a way that does make people accountable. And it's not an easy thing to do. So we have to pray really hard at how to do this. We're learning. We've been on this road for over 30 years trying to do it, and we're still trying to figure it out. Fortunately we create spaces, and we have networks of people all across the country, and we gather not only with Mexican and Native, and now with African, and we're gathering together with people of all races, because we are all wounded that way. We must come together in the sense of sacredness, and now racial equity and racial justice is really important. And the young people are guiding that, those marches and those protests. But one of the things that's really important is that the efforts be grounded in spirituality too. It has to have a spiritual base, So I don't know if I answered your question, but
Yeah, you did. And, one of the things that some of our leaders, cultural leaders in this area have attempted to do, I don't think that it's sustained, is a rites of passage for young men. We have the flower dance ceremony in our community, which is the women's coming of age ceremony for our local indigenous Yurok, Kupa, Karuk, Wiyot, Talawa women. But the rites of passage for men and that we don't really have a sustainable, or I don't want to use the word sustainable, but just any sort of structure around that. And so I'm curious of, like, you've mentioned rites of passage for the young men, and like what traditions are you borrowing from, and how did you implement that, and what have you found that's been helpful about the rites of passages programming? I don't want to use the program either, but just rites of passages work that you've done with the young men of color.
well, and I think people think that rites of passage is a one-time event or a one-time thing. It's a lifelong journey, and I think that there's lessons that you learn, along the way. The important thing, first of all, is to have men that are willing to make that commitment. We go in communities and we ask, are there 4 men here? Give me 4 men in this community that will step up. And all I need is 3 hours a week. Will you commit 3 hours a week? And all I want you to do is I want you to gather in circle. And I want you to hold, talking space, and there's some teachings that you can give and reflections, but create a safe space and if it's for men, you create it for young men, right? And we do have, certain teachings. We have curriculums that have come from our traditions, but also we have had to make them more contemporary because, young people are now with the internet and all the other stuff and the, sex trafficking and, all kinds of other things, the pornography. I mean, just so many things that are going on that, we have to address modern day things, but the values are still the same. Those values are still the same. And so we have, out of those values, and in our tradition, we have 7 principles of honorable manhood, right? And so we rely on those 7 principles. These are the 7 principles of sacred manhood, and this is what we strive to be every day, right? But there are certain teachings that go along, with those principles, and it really is a journey. What we do is, we have a Jova Noble program, Noble Young Man's program, and young people go through, a series of teachings, and when they finish, we then do a ceremony. We then do an honoring of them, right? And then they go to the next phase. It's not over. They go to the next phase, right? And the first circle is a turtle circle, and the next one is a coyote circle, right? And then you move on, right, to that jaguar, and then to the hawk, and so there's different phases that they go through. By the time they receive that hawk circle, their responsibility is to guide the other circles. They're to guide, and the most difficult part of this is not learning the teachings, it's living the teachings, right? Because once you decide this pathway, there's certain things you can't do no more. There's certain things you got to be different about, right? And same thing with men. That's why I say, give me 4 men, but the men got to go through their own process first. Not that they're perfect men, but they got to make a commitment to these principles, to these ways, right? And so it is a process. It is a journey. There are, and I think that, you say, where do these traditions come from? They come from our culture, but also, they come from our spirit. Because some things, some songs just come through you. But where did they come? They came through my spirit, right? And this is a song I'm going to offer you right here. And and now this becomes your rites of passage song. You ask young people are real creative. They'll spit language, you say, create a song, they'll create their own song. You say, create it on these principles. Think of your ancestors, light a little bit of cedar, and create a song, and they can help co-create things, right? Because that's the way our ancestors did. As long as it came from a good place, it was sacred, And some of us have those traditional ways that have been passed down, and some of us don't. It doesn't mean that they're no longer there. It just means that we have to get to a place where the Spirit will then send them back to us, right? And we can co-create that and then develop that so the next generation. We've been doing this for a lot of years, and so now we have generations. We have grandchildren that their grandfather went through this process, and now they're kids, and now so we are recreating, if you will, our villages, and when we need to do that, and it starts one person at a time, one community at a time, that way.
Thank you. That makes sense. And we're gonna maybe take a pause. We're about 15 minutes out, and so I know we have some questions. A lot of awesome comments from our audience, and so anybody have any other questions? Please put it on the comment section on Facebook, and I know Shoshone's gonna read some of these questions, and maybe Jerry, you can answer some other questions from the audience.
Right.
So we got a question from Jim Bowie. He said, what are some tools you use to keep you focused through what we're all experiencing in this pandemic?
Wow, that's a good one. Well, I believe that the universe gives us a lot of teachings, and so I rely a lot on the elements of the universe, and so for me, it's really important for Mother Earth, for me to be connected to the earth, and so even in this pandemic time, to be connected to the plants, be connected to the earth, put your hands in the ground. If you can lay on some grass, if you can plant and eat vegetables and things that are from the earth, it'll help reground you. I think the other thing is connecting with grandfather son. That vitamin D helps your metabolism, but it also allows you to release. One of my elders from Mexico, Huichol elder, he gets up every morning and greets grandfather and takes his hat off and gets that sun and blesses himself and cleanses himself off that way. But that sun reminds us of that light within us, and so making sure that you get out and feel the sun. We can be cooped up too much, where we're not really feeling that light. The other thing is that beautiful feminine energy of the water. We need to drink water. We need to be in water. We need to bathe. We need to cleanse ourselves with that water. But that water is very, very important to us. That it's a feminine energy, and it can cleanse us. It can shed us from other things. I know my companion takes baths with lavender and all those things. I take baths not with lavender, but I'll put some sage in there, whatever. But all those things can detoxify you too, because and then the wind, that breath, just breathing, and that breath is really important, and if you have traditional songs that you sing, that can really help you sing those songs, allow that breath, allow that wind, to come through that way with those songs, and lighting some medicine that helps you breathe. There's certain herbs that can help you breathe. Rosemary can help you breathe. So there's certain plants with your breath that can help cleanse you. And then, Grandmother Moon, make sure you rest. You got to turn that TV off. You got to turn those electronics off and put those devices away from you so that you can really rest, right? But I think the last thing is that, as we do that to ground ourselves, it's to stay connected with other people. And even, in this pandemic, we can still, advocate for movement, for social justice, for racial equity, and to the way that you can. Not all of us can get out and march and protest, but we all have a voice, and we all have a way. And even if you're sending prayers, we need to do something active. So get out of wherever you're at and do something active. Do some movement. Do some, dance is really important. Singing is important. All of those things that keep you active. I think in the end, it's remembering to practice your traditions, whatever prayer traditions you have, because our ancestors have been through this before. They've come this way and have experienced what we're calling pandemics, They've experienced, different things trying to annihilate them, and they've been this way before. So we got to call those ancestors medicine and their teachings and their prayers, to help us. Let's be gentle with each other. Let's be compassionate with each other. Let's be loving with each other, and try and take this opportunity of transformation. It's also a time for us to do our work, and we as men have to do our work in order to deal with the toxicity that we have in us, so we can be better partners, better fathers, better husbands, better workers, that way. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yeah, it does. I just want to take a minute to read some of the comments. I think some of them are really great, or all of them are really great, but I was going to read some of them to you. Kim Rincan, she said, yes, rites of passages for men. I'm a mom of 3 sons. I've been looking for an opportunity for them on the East Coast. And then there was actually a response for connecting her to services on the East Coast. And so there are some other comments to connect people in different areas of the country with some other services out there that might be beneficial to them. So I just wanted to share that with you.
We also have a network of people all across the country. So we have groups all across the country that are doing rites of passage, that are doing youth development, that are doing healing work, that are running, healing circles, and for boys and men, and there's a number for women as well. So if you just go email us, or we can send you some connections to different places as well. Yeah.
Thank you. And as we're winding down, Jerry, I'm wondering, a lot of what we're doing, and we've talked about this, but just to sort of maybe dig a little deeper, a lot of what we're doing is youth programs, and really what we're trying to focus more on is youth leadership, developing the next generation of leaders and people that will continue to fight the good fight and be well. And so I'm wondering, through all your work with youth and adults, and you being, as I see it, a profoundly positive and transformational leader, like, what would you have to say about ways that we can develop leaders, as maybe a way to summarize what we've already talked about, or add to any things that you haven't talked about, leadership development?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, you mentioned leaderships that can also be well. And I think that's important. I think that a leader is one person in the circle, but they must recognize they're part of a circle. It's not an individualistic thing. I think that it's also, a different type of leadership, not that you follow me, but that I am here to put in work, really, to gather ideas and to formulate processes so we can co-create a journey, to co-create a process to undo wounded ways, but to create opportunities so that we can fulfill all of our sacred purposes. And I think that for people of color, it starts with just advocating for systems and programs and schools and practitioners to acknowledge that we deserve to be seen, and we deserve to be treated in an honorable, respectful way. We deserve programs and education and history that honors who we are, and that we ourselves have medicine and we ourselves have teachings. And so part of that leadership is lifting those things up, but also connecting with those people that can help develop those things, but also can support those ways. So it doesn't mean that if I'm a leader, I have to have all the knowledge, that I have to have all the answers. It just means that I may be the one that helps to put things together, connect people, identify. I think about my dad. My dad, hardworking man, and I would get upset because he would be making this carne asada, and make a big bunch of it, and then he only give a little bit to us, and he'd wrap a bunch in in aluminum foil, and then he'd get in his truck and take a ride and give it to all these people. And I get upset, Dad, you're taking all our meat, man, you know. I didn't understand what he was doing. And then we had a plumbing problem, and he'd get on the phone and, hey, compadre, you know, I was wondering, can you tell me what to do with this plumbing thing, you know? He wasn't saying, come help me with the plumbing. He was like, can you tell me what to do? 15 minutes later, the guy would show up and fix the plumbing, right? Because my dad had made this connection, you know. He had made it, so it doesn't mean that he had to do it, but he had connections. You know, that's a good leader. Those that have those connections can get along with a lot of different people, people that you agree with and people you don't agree with. How do you build bridges? How do you work with diverse populations? How do you honor your people in a good way? But the first step is you got to be that example. You got to live these teachings, and then first step of a leader, you got to know these ways. And so you have to surround yourself also with people that are going to teach you. We all need some elder. We all need some place to go for counsel. All of us need that, right? Even myself, I need that, you know. And my biggest teacher is my companion. You know, she'll tell me straight up when I'm on, and she'll tell me straight up when I'm not, you know. And I ask her for those blessings. I ask her for her reflection, you know. And she's straight up with me about it too, you know, and I appreciate that, you know. But we all need to have that, you know. Once you think, you know, you have all the answers and you have all the medicine, and then you're no longer leading anything, you know, but yourself. And it's your ego that's guiding you. So, you know, there's a whole number of principles, I think, that, and four main principles is dignity. You know, that sense of you having dignity, but you treating people with dignity. Respect. Respect all people. People come from different ways and different points of view. Building trust. How do you connect and build trust in spite of the differences? And then love. We got to do it all with love. It's really about that love. How do you, if you don't love your work, if you don't love doing this, if you don't love people, then you probably shouldn't be guiding anyone that way. You know, we at the National Compadres Network, we do a lot of this work, a lot of training, capacity building. We have curriculum, we have programs, and, you know, you can look us up because this is a lot of what we do. And it's not like we go in and train you, but we can go in and help you co-create. We can help build this. We can share what we have, and then on that, you can then develop from there, you know. Sometimes after you see an idea and I say, oh yeah, okay, I got to see how we can do it, you know. Sometimes you need a template that way. So that's a lot of the work that we do, you know, that way. And
Yeah. And it seems like, you know, I wrote an article on traditional healing with one of my mentors, Joe Gahn. He was a speaker on here, but we interviewed people that were considered traditional healers about like what is it about traditional healing. And one of the things that they said was, you don't choose to be a traditional healer, you're choosing by the community. And so one of the things that came up when you're talking about is you really, my guess is, don't choose to be a leader. The community chooses you. And I would guess it's based on who you are as a person.
yeah, and I think, but I think even in that realm, you know, some of us that are getting a little bit older, you know, we also have to be cognizant of making some space, you know, because a lot of times people will ask me to show up and to speak or something, and I'll refer them to my nephews, and they want me to be there, but I know if I'm there, they're going to look to me. So sometimes I have to say, no, I'm going to refer my nephew, and after they hear him, they say, okay, he's really good. We don't need you no more, which is fine, you know. But even when we're in meetings and stuff like that, we need to know how to, you know, how to create space, how to make space for other people. And they may not do it as good as you because you've been doing it longer. They may not do it exactly like you, but that's not the goal. The goal is that allow them to develop and support. And even when they think they messed up, you don't criticize them and say, nephew, let me show you. Yeah, that was really good, but let me offer something. And the way you guide is also really important. Let me offer you some things about how you can enhance that, or tell the story a little bit different, or maybe, you know, so there's a way of guiding, and it's more guiding rather than leading, and, you know, it really is about supporting that way. So yeah, I think we need to relearn that because, you know, many of us have picked up these Western ways too, you know, that has kind of contaminated our true sense of guidance.
All right, well, Jerry, it's been a fabulous time. Shoshone, thank you for the awesome questions, and everybody that has tuned in, you know, and asked questions, made great comments. We'll get back to you. I want to thank Jerry for his time. I think that the world in these times need more people like Jerry. The energy and the vibrancy that I get from listening to you inspires me, makes me want to do better, become a better person. And so thank you for that. If they have any last words or any where we can find you, anything, Jerry?
I mean, yeah, I just want to thank you and everybody that's listening for what you do, and just continue doing it in a good way. And we're all learning together. We're all healing together. You can find us at nationalcompadresnetwork.org. You can also look at my website, jerryteo.com, and the links are there if you need to connect in any way. And have CDs and books and all those things if any of those things are helpful to you, and children's books, all those things. But to really appreciate this time and all that you all are doing. And any way we can support you, let us know. And thank you, and may the Creator continue blessing you in a good way. And make sure, eat those beans.
Uh-huh. Yes. It was my birthday yesterday, Jerry. We had I had some beans, but it was from a local restaurant, Luz Milas. But it was good.
Happy birthday.
All right. All right. Take care, everybody. We're going live no longer.